Happy Monday, everybody. So if you were in my fifth, sixth, and eighth periods on Monday, I ended up not being there. So my daughter, Avi Ann, has like really high fever and was throwing up, and she tested negative for strep and flu. So they had to COVID test her. So with that being said, of course, Banks and I had to come home and we're all quarantined until we get her results back. Hopefully they're negative and it's just this bad stomach bug that's going around. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, of course, you know, in-person and online learners, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are remote days, unless on Thursday, of course, you are a sophomore taking the biology EOC, which if that's the case, good luck on Thursday. So my things that I want you guys to accomplish whilst remote learners on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are watching this video, okay, and doing your lesson 5. So not just watching this, but then going back in and kind of like watching the videos that I embed into the slideshow, and then doing your either research for your battles projects if you are in my pre-AP classes, or your causes of World War II gallery walk if you are in my on-level classes. And so those of you that are in on-level classes, so that's my second, third, and fifth period, we will be grading those on Friday. So make sure that you've got those either in hand or you've turned it in by noon on Thursday if you do the online version. So, okay, without further ado, this is lesson 5. And this is a pretty big lesson. It talks about some massive battles and operations of World War II, especially right there at the very beginning, in between really about 1939 and the end of 1942. So I'm not going to, I can't get into the very detailed nitty-gritties of each battle. I wish that we had that kind of time, but we don't. I try to provide you guys with movies or great documentary clips throughout this particular lesson. So again, as always, I really encourage you to watch those embedded videos, even if they are movies. Some movies that are based on World War II, whether they be certain battles or whether they be certain people, can actually be really pretty incredible to give you, a sense of what these men and women went through, during that time. So, and not all of them are like old. There's a lot of movies actually that have come out here recently, just in the last few years, about some major moments of World War II. So anyways, all right, here we go. So, of course, the last lesson we talked about, in Europe at least, World War II begins September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland, okay? And he is going to really shock Europe because he is able to take it over pretty quickly using his blitzkrieg tactics. Blitzkrieg in German just means lightning war. And so what he would do is he would go in like super fast, with his tanks and trucks, and then he would flank his tanks and trucks with his infantry and air fire with the Luftwaffe, which is their air force. And it was just like this crazy fast, very, very intense battle tactic that worked. I mean, it worked well. And within 4 weeks, Poland is going to completely surrender. And then, of course, because as I also told you guys in the last lesson, he and Stalin made their little deal. Stalin is going to get the eastern portion of it for now. So, let's see what this is. This is just a good little video talking about Blitzkrieg. It's from a documentary called Weaponology. So, again, Hitler is going to use his blitzkrieg. Now, the French, after World War I, had created what is known as the Maginot Line. And it was a series of very, very strong fortifications along the French and German border. If you'll remember, of course, France made the Rhineland also be demilitarized as like a buffer zone. So I mean, France is particularly worried about German aggression, and rightfully so. But just like they did in World War I, they're going to go through Belgium, where and attack coming in through Belgium because they have weaker fortifications along the Belgium-French borders. So didn't really quite learn their lesson there. When the German army does this, though, it splits the Allied forces in half because so many of them are concentrated along the Maginot Line. But they are going to, when they split them in half, of course, you have pretty much the entire British army and then a large portion of your French troops pushing north up onto the coastline, and they end up in a town called Dunkirk on the English Channel there in the northern portion of France, and they're stuck. And so this is very famously, of course, the miracle of Dunkirk. They are going to have to get, about 400,000 men off of the beaches there, whilst also being dive bombed, and the ships are being bombed, of course, by the Luftwaffe. Winston Churchill is going to famously call on every single boat in England to cross the channel and try to go pick up men. So if you see that picture to like the left of my head, I mean, that's literally what they were doing. I mean, you had you had the British people who had just like this little boat, like sailing it or driving it across the English Channel to Dunkirk and just trying to pick up 2 or 3 soldiers here and there. And they were able to successfully get almost all of the British army back home. And this is considered a miracle because, of course, had that not happened and they couldn't, if they couldn't have gotten all of those men back to Britain and back home, I mean, Britain would have fallen. I mean, Hitler would have taken Europe within the first year of the war. And that's a scary thing to think about. So that's a lot of times why Dunkirk, of course, is referred to as a miracle. There is an incredible movie that was actually just came out here a few years ago about Dunkirk. This is the trailer for it. So I challenge you again to watch it. So the French are going to sign an armistice on June 22nd, 1940. Okay, so I mean, this is he invaded Poland September 1, 1939, completely takes over, Belgium, takes over, he's going to end up taking over like Norway, and then of course, boom, France, June 22nd, 1940. So, I mean, the German armies within the first 9 months of the war occupy a huge portion of Europe already. I mean, they pretty much are in complete control of Western and Central Europe. But of course, British resolve is strengthened by that bulldog leadership of Winston Churchill and his incredible speeches and him being able to really kind of try to keep the British people's morale up. Against, of course, the tyranny of Hitler. There is also an incredible movie that is new, just a few years old, about Winston Churchill. It's, Gary Oldman plays him. It's crazy. If you see a picture of Gary Oldman, like normally, and then you see him playing Winston Churchill, like he completely got transformed by makeup. Like it's just nuts how much they turned him into Winston Churchill. And then he himself does an absolutely incredible portrayal of Winston Churchill and won an Oscar for his performance. So this is the very famous speech, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing strips, we shall fight on the hills, we shall, all that stuff. This is from a clip from that movie. You can actually find the actual speech given by Churchill as well on YouTube. So again, challenge you to watch it. So the United States, right? Like, what are we doing? Well, again, we're not getting involved. Public opinion at this point in time was very, very like anti getting involved in another European conflict. Of course, our people were kind of like, no, like Hitler is Europe's problem, and we don't need to get involved. And we went down that road in World War One, and look at all the men that we lost, and like we're not going to do that. So we very much had a neutral viewpoint on it at the beginning. We did send money, like just like we did during World War One. We were sending money, we were sending supplies, and what was known as the Lend-Lease Act to Britain. Trying to help them as best we could. FDR is going to allow any pilot in the United States Air Force to volunteer and go over there and fly for the RAF or the Royal Air Force if they wanted to. And we did. We had actually lots of pilots, American pilots, who felt like we needed to be in the war long before we got involved, who go over there and fly in the Battle of Britain, which we'll talk about here in a minute during 40. So here we go. So the Battle of Britain is basically a air showdown between the RAF, which is the Royal Air Force, and the Luftwaffe, which is the Air Force for Germany. And it's going to start in August of 1940, where you are going to see the Luftwaffe flying over the English Channel and bombing the ever-living crap out of Britain. Specifically, London is going to be bombed really, really hard during the Battle of Britain. The bombing of London becomes known as the Blitz. And during this time frame, and they're going to just try that. They're doing this to try to lower morale and get them to, of course, capitulate or give in and say like, oh, okay, start trying to broker like peace deals, because the civilian population is being bombed and killed, and they don't want that. That was the goal of bombing these cities, and bombing civilians. But the British actually, like, it just pisses them off like even more. It does the polar opposite of what they are hoping. And of course, this is very famously when Churchill coins the phrase, like keep calm and carry on. There for a while, that slogan was like everywhere, and then they would change it up and be like, like keep calm and eat tacos, or, like something like that. But the actually original saying, keep calm and carry on, was again coined by Winston Churchill during the Blitz, telling his people, like, we've got you. We're not, we are not going to fall to this tyrant. Like, just keep calm and carry on. Like, keep doing your job, keep going to work, keep, trying to be as normal as possible. So it's a very historic saying. This is a really incredible statistics video of the Battle of Britain. It kind of shows you like how many airplanes were lost, and like it's really pretty incredible to look at the statistics. So again, like, I challenge you to watch that. This is actually a scene from the movie Pearl Harbor, which of course is a love story. I mean, but it's it's got the Michael Bay Pearl Harbor scenes and everything. But I particularly like their Battle of Britain scene. I feel like it's actually pretty good. So anyways, I just challenge you guys to watch it again. And obviously this is kind of video heavy, but I mean, come on, it's World War II. There's all kinds of stuff that I can show you guys, especially when it comes to like movie clips. I mean, it's just all kinds of stuff. So, all right. Operation Barbarossa. This is going to be launched in 41 by Hitler. Okay. And this ends up being like his big Napoleonic mistake. So, he always had it in his mind to conquer the Soviet Union. Like the whole like peace deal with Stalin when he initially invaded Poland was just so that he could go deal with France and not have two fronts. I mean, that was the whole point of that. But now that Britain hasn't fallen as quickly as he was hoping, and that they're kind of digging their heels in more than he thought they would, especially when, the Battle of Britain was pretty much lost by the Luftwaffe. He's kind of like, well, okay, again, they're doing a little bit better than I thought, so I'm going to turn around and focus my efforts to the east. Sorry. So he is going to invade the Soviet Union. It is scheduled for the spring of 41, but he gets kind of sidetracked in the Balkans for a while, and it gets pushed back to the end of June. Well, just like Napoleon, he's overconfident, and he's all like, oh, it's not going to be a problem. We'll be in and out before winter sets in, and we don't have to, we won't have to be dealing with the Soviets in the winter. Oh, were they wrong? You have an 1,800-mile front. Again, I think he very much underestimated Stalin. And he also underestimates the fact that Stalin is going to not give two craps how many Russian people die. We talked about Stalin already in previous lessons, and the guy could care less about his people. He kills like 20 million of his own people before World War II even starts, in a man-made famine, and then the Great Purge. So, again, this is a man who does not care. And I think Hitler very much underestimates him. And so, it is not going to go quickly or smoothly, and the Germans are going to be like in it for the long haul, trying to, ease, just like get into the Soviet Union. And they are facing a pretty like ominous realization by the winter of 40 and 41 that, okay, like this did not go as planned. Wait just a second. No, okay. All right. So let's look, of course, at how the United States gets into the war, and that is very famously because of Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Those very famous words, of course, said by our president, FDR, in his speech after Pearl Harbor was attacked. So this is a surprise attack on a Sunday morning. Really, Japan had kind of engaged in peace talks with us because remember, we were economically sanctioning them, and we were not expecting them to be aggressive towards us. We really were thinking like, well, they probably aren't going to mess with us. We mean too much to them in terms of a supply line. And oh boy, were we wrong. They're going to, of course, in this surprise attack, going to destroy 350 airplanes. They're going to damage or sink 18 ships, and then kill or wound more than 3,500 Americans. So when this happens, of course, the people of the United States no longer are willing to be pacifists, and they're not willing to be neutral anymore. That is one thing about Americans. When you mess with us, we will come together, and we demand revenge and retribution. And I think, I can't remember which one it was, if it was Yamamoto or which one of the ones said it, but of course, supposedly they said, I'm afraid all we've done is awaken a sleeping giant, when they bombed us at Pearl Harbor, and were they right. So this is, of course, an incredible clip from a documentary about survivors from Pearl Harbor, and what they witnessed that day. And Pearl Harbor was exceptionally tough. There was a man who was a Pearl Harbor survivor that used to live in Clifton. He's passed away now, but I had the pleasure of getting to talk to him a couple of times. He would come to the Turnersville homecoming out here, and he had just this amazing ability to share. I mean, a lot of these men had, a lot of them wouldn't talk about it because it was just too hard, but he was willing to talk and share his experience. And he said he thought the hardest thing that he had to see and had to deal with was, so like all of the oil, that was leaking out of the ships that had been bombed and were seeking. Well, oil and water don't mix, so that oil came to the top. And then, because everything's getting shot up, it was actually on fire. So he said it was the craziest thing to see. He said, like, literally the bay and the ocean was like on fire. I mean, and it was because all this oil was sitting up at the top. And he said, and men, of course, were having to bail off these ships, or they were falling off these ships that were either sinking or whatever, and they were falling into like boiling water pretty much. And he said, like, to this day I'll never forget those screams. He was like, they're screams like you've never heard before. And it's that generation, what they endured because of World War II is just, I mean, like my grandmother, she actually just turned 93 yesterday. She'll tell you like what she considered potentially the love of her life died at Pearl Harbor. So, I mean, cause she was like 18 at the time, and, he got shipped off, and unfortunately he was there the day they attacked. So, it's if you have the chance to visit with people of that generation, I challenge you to do so. Even if they weren't in the war, they can give you an incredible insight, even if they were back home, as to like how people dealt with that. So, okay, so of course, the same day that Pearl Harbor happens, Japan also attacks the Philippines. They attack in Malaysia, and they end up, it's kind of like this big, almost like blitzkrieg day for the Japanese on December 7th. And again, Japan's whole justification behind it was, we need more resources and we need more raw materials. And, if you're going to place economic sanctions on us, well, then we're just going to start taking more stuff over, so we don't have to depend on you and rely on you. And by the way, like, suck it for putting economic sanctions on us. We're going to surprise attack you at Pearl Harbor. I mean, that's pretty much what was going on. So, Tojo, who again is the military dictator, had hoped the United States, what, this is so stupid. He thought that we would just kind of like lie down after Pearl Harbor and be all like, okay, you have the Pacific, and, it's like he thought that we would still not get involved after that. And oh my gosh, again, was he wrong? I mean, no, all you did was really, really, really piss off an entire nation of people. So of course, the entry of the United States into the war creates the new Grand Alliance, that is fighting, of course, the Axis powers. There on the screen that you can see. And at the beginning of 1943, the Allies say, we will fight until the Axis surrender unconditionally. Like, this is not going to be one of these like peace term situations. Like, you have to surrender unconditionally before we stop. So, by the beginning of 41, I mean, Hitler realizes that he's, kind of in it for the long haul, more so on the Eastern Front with the Soviet Union than he had hoped. But, he's still pretty dominant and dominating all throughout the year of 41, and into even 42. Because you have to consider, like, the United States really doesn't get involved in the war until the beginning of 1942. Because Pearl Harbor happened in December of 41. So it's the end of the year. And so, but by the end of 1942, of course, the United States is very much involved, and we, of course, are a big bolstering component to the Allied forces, and things are not looking too hot for him by the end of 1942. So, our initial big push against Hitler was in North Africa. So he had not only, if we go back a screen, he had not only, and you can't see, unfortunately, south of the Mediterranean in that map, but if it were to extend down and show you North Africa on this map, Hitler had taken over, pretty much that whole northern portion of Africa as well. So, I mean, not only does he control pretty much all of Europe except Great Britain, but he also controls the Mediterranean and North Africa. So the guy very much, again, at the beginning of 1942, I mean, he's kicking butt and taking names, but here we come. So, Erwin Rommel is nicknamed the Desert Fox, and he is probably one of Hitler's, if not Hitler's best generals. And he is going to face off against one of our best generals, Patton. And they are going to play this incredible, like, tactical maneuvering kind of game with each other. I mean, and that's the thing is, Rommel, of course, he's a Nazi, so I'm not trying to like say anything positive about the guy, but like as far as just a military commander goes, he is still to this day one of the most studied and well respected military generals, just because again, like he was very brilliant. And Patton, they were sworn enemies, but they had this kind of mutual respect for one another. And so, anyways, there's all kind, like there's an incredible movie called just Patton that I challenge you to watch. That's a great representation of him. But we are going to push the troops, the German and Italian troops, out of North Africa again by the end of 1942, and they're going to be forced to, of course, cross the Mediterranean and go back into Italy, where we will continue to force them up the Italian peninsula through 1943 and 44. Patton has, well, I tell you what, I'll tell you the story about Patton in the next unit, or in the next lesson, because it will coincide better with D-Day when I tell you that. So he's got a kind of a crazy story with him. Okay, so Battle of Stalingrad is probably one of the most like horrific battles in World War II. It becomes a siege on the city, and German troops basically cut off Stalingrad, and they're trapped actually and encircled. They aren't prepared for the conditions. They can't get supply lines in because they're trapped. And I mean, again, like, unfortunately, the city itself becomes the battleground. And so tons of civilians are killed. Tom Brokaw, in that video we watched in the last lesson about, when he was talking about Stalin, this is what he's talking about. He was like, at the Battle of Stalingrad, German troops would give little Russian kids like pieces of bread, because you have to think, like, if the German army is stuck inside Stalingrad and there are no supplies that are coming into the city because the Soviets are trying to starve them out so that they surrender, all those civilians that are also inside of Stalingrad are not getting anything. And so they would pay, they would give these kids food, little bit of food that they had. And if they went and filled up, if they would go fill their canteens up in the river, and Stalin would order Soviet snipers to shoot and kill those little kids. I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. I've said time and time again, like, I honestly, Stalin was worse than Hitler. I mean, like, I know it's a low bar, but I mean, I personally, I believe Stalin was a bigger villain than Hitler. And I mean, they're, like I said, they're both in hell together, commiserating together in the deepest, most awful portions of that place. But I'm just saying, like, he was horrible. Um, so, anyways, Stalingrad is a big blow to Hitler because he's going to lose his Sixth Army, which is considered like the best of the best in the German army. And so by the spring of 1943, Hitler realizes, like, I'm not going to beat Stalin and I'm not going to beat the Soviets. And he, unfortunately, or fortunately, not unfortunately. But anyways, this is a video on the statistics of Stalingrad that's pretty good. And then there is also, I thought that I had it on here, but I guess I don't. There's also an incredible movie. It's called Enemy at the Gates. It has Jude Law in it when he's pretty young, actually. It has like Rachel Weisz. I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. Ed Harris. Anyways, it's a really great movie. It's based on a true story. And Jude Law plays a sniper who was named Vasily Zaitsev, who, again, is a true historical figure and was a big, like, boost to the Soviet civilian morale because he was this, like, incredible sniper that went around Stalingrad during the Battle of Stalingrad, like, taking out top German officials. And so it's a good movie. So in the Asian theater, what do we have going on, of course, after Pearl Harbor? Well, I've told you guys about the Doolittle raid. That was kind of like our initial response to the Battle of Pearl Harbor. You know, Doolittle and his men are going to fly over and bomb Tokyo. But then after that, we've got to, number one, like, kind of get our Navy back up and going and get us all over there. And so we have the Battle of Coral Sea that's going to take place on May 7th and 8th, 1942. This is pretty much going to save Australia from the grips of the Japanese. The Japanese actually do bomb Darwin and some other cities within Australia. So Australia was not without its moments of aggression from the Japanese Zeros, which were their fighter planes. So, but the big turning point in the Pacific where we were not on the defensive, but then we turned around and very much were on the offensive, was at the Battle of Midway Island. This is going to be on June 4th, 1942. And we are going to end up destroying 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, which of course is huge. And of course, there's a pretty new movie that's called just Midway. It's above my head there. That's an incredible movie to watch specifically. And again, the men that are showcased in the movie are real. I mean, they're based on real people that were a part of the Battle of Midway. So this is the movie trailer for that. Again, I challenge you to watch it. So by the fall of 1942, we basically have 2 operations taking place within the Pacific. One is a big push to the Philippines through New Guinea by U.S. General Douglas MacArthur. He's there with his big smoke pipe. Always cracks me up. And then 2, it's a series between the Marine and the Navy of island hopping. So what we were doing is we would do this thing called island hopping, and this was, we would not strategically go from like island to island to island trying to work our way up. What we would do is we would pick one and like hop over another one. And this then isolated, of course, the Japanese that were on the island that we hopped over. and it would starve them out, right? And because then they're behind enemy lines, basically. And that also makes it hard to determine where we're going to hit next, where we're going to land next to try to fight. And so it worked pretty well throughout, again, 42, 43, and into 44. So this series of island hoppings. Let me see. After engagements near the Solomon Islands from August to November 1942, the Japanese fortunes began to fade. Yes. So this is just, again, another video documentary about island hopping. And that's it. Again, like, that is some pretty major information about World War II. Some, talked about some pretty major battles, and it's so much more exemplified when I'm in class with you guys. After we grade on Friday the papers, or in my pre-AP classes, we might talk about your projects a little bit. What I'll do is we can go back in and watch some of those videos, because I really want to make sure that you guys can see them, and we can review some of the info. So, all right, y'all have a great week. If you have any questions, email me. I'm at home, but I'm remote. I have my computer, so we will pick up lesson 6 next week and finish up the unit. Have a great one. Bye.